The student was freezing in the rain until the mafia boss draped his coat over her. The November rain in Florence was not simply water falling from the sky. It was an icy, unforgiving veil that transformed the ancient, worn cobblestone streets into dark, merciless mirrors reflecting a city without pity. Huddled desperately under the heavy, dripping stone eaves of a closed public library, Elena, a young medical student, cowers against the freezing wall. Her coat is far too thin to withstand the bitter November wind, cut from a cheap, fragile fabric that only made sense in the lingering warmth of September. Parked silently across the flooded street, Dante Medici observes the violent, uncontrollable trembling of her fragile shoulders from behind the tinted, impenetrable glass of his black SUV. He slowly and methodically rotates the heavy gold signet ring on his right hand, feeling the absolute weight of the Medici crest pressing into his scarred skin. The sealed interior of the armored vehicle is thick with his presence, carrying the dark, intimidating scent of ancient cedar, deep library leather, and a lingering, metallic aroma that has no name, but smells entirely of absolute power and buried secrets. Dante does not order one of his armed men to intervene. He opens the heavy door himself and steps out directly into the violent storm, completely ignoring the umbrella his driver offers. They thought she was just another nameless shadow fading in the rain. Dante Medici saw in her the future that the world was trying to freeze alive. The heavy, reinforced door of the armored SUV closes with a muffled, definitive thud, instantly severing the warm, quiet sanctuary of the vehicle from the chaos outside. Dante Medici stands alone on the flooded, dark cobblestone streets of Florence. The November storm does not hesitate to assault him. The icy, unforgiving veil of rain instantly soaks the broad shoulders of his bespoke, tailored suit. He does not flinch. He does not hurry. His pace is the slow, deliberate march of a man who has long since stopped fearing the wrath of the sky. To understand why the Don of the Florentine Syndicate is walking through a freezing tempest without an umbrella, one must understand the profound, suffocating emptiness of the Palazzo Medici. His fortress is vast, decorated with priceless Renaissance art, and guarded by an army of lethal, silent men. Yet, since the night his 4-year-old son, Marco, passed away, the palazzo has become nothing more than a magnificent, echoing tomb. The silence in those grand halls is entirely deafening. Dante often rides through the darkest hours of the night simply to escape the ghost of his child's laughter that still haunts the pristine, empty corridors of his home. As his polished leather shoes crush the freezing puddles, the biting November wind cuts straight through his clothing, settling deep into his bones. It is a specific, agonizing chill. It is the exact same, paralyzing cold that Dante felt radiating from his son's small, lifeless body the moment the lethal fever finally broke and Marco's heart stopped beating. The doctors had tried to explain the biology of the death, but Dante only remembered the sudden, terrifying absence of warmth. The cold had stolen his son, and ever since that night, Dante has harbored a deep, unspoken vendetta against the freezing dark. He stops. He stands towering over the small, fragile figure huddled under the heavy stone eaves of the closed public library. Elena is entirely consumed by the violent shivering of her own body. Her knees are pulled tight against her chest, her thin, cheap fabric coat completely useless against the biting wind. She is a medical student, a girl who spends her days studying the anatomy of survival. Yet she is currently losing her own battle against the elements. She expects the towering, broad-shouldered shadow approaching her to be a threat. In a city run by predators, a man walking through a storm at midnight is rarely a savior. Dante looks down at her. He does not see a beggar. He does not see a nuisance to be cleared from the streets. He sees the fragile, desperate struggle for life that he could not protect in his own hospital room 2 years ago. He does not speak. Words are entirely unnecessary, and the howling wind would only swallow them. Dante slowly reaches up to the collar of his heavy Italian wool coat. With a slow, fluid motion that defies the freezing temperature, the Don of Florence strips the incredibly expensive, heavy coat from his own shoulders. He exposes himself completely to the icy assault of the rain, clad only in his tailored dress shirt and vest. He holds the heavy fabric in his massive, scarred hands for a brief, calculated second. Then, he leans forward and gently drapes the dark wool directly over Elena's trembling, frozen shoulders. The contrast is absolute. The coat is enormous on her small frame, acting as a heavy, impenetrable shield against the world. But it is not just the thick, expensive fabric that shocks her system. It is the intense, radiating heat trapped deeply within the wool. The profound, living warmth of Dante's body transfers immediately from the heavy lining into her freezing skin. The dark, intimidating scent of ancient cedar, library leather, and absolute power wraps around her like a physical embrace. She stops shivering. The paralyzing cold in her bones is instantly neutralized by the sheer, overwhelming heat of a man who burns with the quiet intensity of a dying star. Dante stands above her, the icy rain slicking his dark hair and soaking his shirt. He does not ask for gratitude. He simply looks down at her, silently ensuring that the cold will not claim another innocent life on his watch. The heavy Italian wool of the bespoke coat settles over Elena's frail shoulders with the crushing, comforting weight of a physical fortress. For the past 2 hours, the freezing November rain had been slowly stealing the life from her bones, turning her fingers completely numb and clouding her exhausted mind. Now the profound, radiating heat from the stranger's body immediately begins to thaw the ice in her blood. Elena does not know who the towering man standing in the freezing rain is. She tilts her head up, pulling the dark collar tighter around her neck. The torrential rain violently assaults his crisp dress shirt, completely soaking the expensive fabric in seconds, yet he does not flinch. He stands completely still, a monolith of suppressed, lethal control. In the dim, flickering light of the street lamp, his face is carved from heavy shadows and sharp angles. His eyes hold the color of turbulent, dark water, carrying a terrifying depth that makes her breath catch in her throat. She only feels the profound, intoxicating scent of ancient cedar and deep library leather wrapping around her senses. She wants to speak. She wants to thank him, to ask him why a man, who clearly commands millions, would sacrifice his own warmth for a nameless girl, shivering in the dark. But her teeth are still chattering, and the sheer, intimidating gravity of his presence silences the words on her tongue. To understand the catalyst of this encounter, one must look at the battered, overflowing canvas tote bag resting at Elena's wet shoes. It is filled with heavy, water-damaged medical textbooks. Her innocence is forged in absolute, crushing exhaustion. Why is she on the street so late, freezing under the stone eaves? She had been sitting in the very back corner of the public library until the librarian finally forced her to leave at closing time. She is desperately trying to memorize human anatomy, surviving on black coffee and the terrifying, relentless pressure of a debt she did not create. She is a medical student, holding on to her innocence and her future while a dark, unseen danger actively pursues her. She works 3 separate minimum wage jobs just to afford the tram ticket to the university. She is a girl who understands how to diagnose a failing heart, but she has absolutely no idea how to cure the financial ruin that is slowly suffocating her entire existence. Dante observes the canvas bag. He looks at the thick medical textbooks peeking out from the frayed zipper. He reads the narrative of her life in the dark circles under her eyes and the cheap, inadequate fabric of her clothing. She is not a victim of laziness. She is a victim of a world that actively punishes those who try to climb out of the dark. He does not ask for her name. He simply looks at her, verifying that the violent trembling in her shoulders has finally stopped. But Dante Medici is not the only predator awake in Florence tonight. While the Don of the Syndicate focuses on the fragile life he is shielding from the cold, a different kind of darkness is gathering across the flooded cobblestones. Through the thick, icy veil of the November storm, a white van sits idling in the shadows on the other side of the square. The engine produces a low, mechanical growl, completely masked by the thunder and the heavy rainfall. The headlights are turned off. The windshield wipers drag sluggishly across the glass, clearing just enough water to reveal the dark silhouettes of two men sitting in the front seats. Who are the men sitting in the dark, watching this exact scene unfold? They are the danger that has been tracking Elena's every move. They are the brutal, uncompromising enforcers of the debt she carries. They had followed her from the university, waiting for the library to close, waiting for the streets to empty, so they could finally isolate her in the freezing rain and collect what they are owed. They had planned to use the storm to cover her screams. But their flawless, violent plan has just collided with a catastrophic variable. The men in the white van stare through the rain at the towering, broad-shouldered man standing over their target. They do not immediately recognize the unbranded, armored black SUV parked nearby, nor do they see the hidden weapons carried by the driver inside it. They only see a man without a coat, ruining his expensive clothes to protect a girl they intend to break. The retention loop of the scene pulls completely tight. Elena sits in the protective warmth of the Italian wool, entirely unaware of the lethal collision course she has just initiated. Dante Medici continues to stand in the freezing rain, his back turned to the white van, unknowingly placing himself between a terrified medical student and the violent predators waiting in the dark. The freezing November rain continues its violent assault on the dark cobblestone streets of Florence. Dante Medici stands in the torrential downpour for a few moments longer, his crisp dress shirt clinging to his broad shoulders, utterly soaked by the icy water. He watches as Elena, enveloped entirely in the heavy, expensive Italian wool of his bespoke coat, finally finds the strength to stand. The profound warmth of the garment acts as a physical shield, allowing her to gather her heavy canvas tote bag and hurry toward the approaching headlights of the final night tram. She does not look back. She simply disappears into the glowing interior of the tram, carrying the Don's coat with her into the night. Across the flooded square, the white van idling in the deep shadows shifts its transmission into gear. The predators inside had seen enough. The moment Dante's heavily armored black SUV had pulled up to the curb, flanked by the subtle but lethal presence of Medici security personnel hidden in the dark, the enforcers recognized they had lost their window of opportunity. The van's tires spin on the wet stone, and it slithers away into the labyrinth of narrow alleys, retreating like a cowardly animal sensing an apex predator. Dante slowly turns and opens the heavy, reinforced door of his SUV. He slides into the back seat, the door shutting with a deep, hermetic thud that instantly cuts off the roaring sound of the storm. The interior of the vehicle is a masterpiece of soundproofed isolation and lethal efficiency. The heavy scent of ancient cedar and rich library leather fills the cabin, completely untouched by the freezing dampness outside. In the front passenger seat, bathed in the pale, clinical blue light of an encrypted tablet, sits Luca. The chief investigator of the Medici syndicate does not ask Dante why he gave away a coat worth thousands of euros to a nameless girl. In their world, Dante's actions are absolute law. Instead, Luca focuses entirely on the architecture of the threat that had just slithered away. He had already memorized the license plate of the white van through the rain-streaked windshield. The vehicle is registered to a front company in the industrial district. Luca says, his voice a low, gravelly hum that vibrates in the quiet cabin. They are debt collectors, Don Medici, brutal ones. They belong to the remnants of the Falcone family, a rival faction operating on the southern borders. Dante leans back against the dark leather upholstery. He feels the damp cold of his ruined shirt against his skin, a stark, lingering reminder of the freezing vulnerability he had just witnessed. He is determined to discover the systemic injustice against the student. "Give me the girl," Dante commands softly, his dark, tempestuous eyes staring out through the tinted glass at the empty, flooded street. Luca's fingers move rapidly across the glowing screen, pulling the fragile, tragic threads of Elena's life from the vast, dark databases of the Florentine underworld. The revelations begin to fall in heavy, suffocating waves, painting a portrait of absolute, systemic cruelty. "Her name is Elena," Luca begins, passing through the encrypted files. She is 22 years old, a third-year medical student at the university. Her grades are flawless, ranking at the absolute top of her class. But she is suffocating Don Medici. She is currently trying to finish her degree while working 3 separate minimum wage jobs just to afford to eat. Dante thinks of the heavy canvas bag resting at her wet shoes, filled with water-damaged anatomy textbooks. He thinks of the violent shivering in her frail shoulders. She is sacrificing her youth, her sleep, and her physical health to learn how to save human lives. Yet, the world is actively trying to crush her. Medical school is expensive, but it does not summon Falcone enforcers in the middle of the night, Dante states, his voice a freezing current that demands the deeper truth. Why is she being hunted? Luca taps the screen, opening a buried financial ledger. The pale blue light reflects off the investigator's stoic face, highlighting a rare flicker of disgust. Because she is paying off debts that are not hers, Luca reveals the absolute injustice of the situation hanging heavily in the quiet cabin. The debt belongs to her father, or rather, it was forced upon him. Dante's jaw tightens. The muscle in his cheek twitches, a microscopic display of the lethal fury beginning to crystallize in his chest. Explain, Dante orders. Her father was a professor of history at the university, Luca explains, unraveling the dark narrative of a man who dared to stand against the syndicate. 3 years ago, the Falcone family needed to acquire a block of historical properties in the center of the city to launder their money. They needed the zoning board to approve the demolition of heritage sites. Elena's father sat on that board. He refused to be bribed. He refused to look away. The silent vehicle feels suddenly heavier, weighed down by the tragic nobility of a man who fought a war with books against men who fought with bullets. He was a professor who was silenced by a rival family, Luca continues quietly. They did not shoot him in the street. That would have drawn the police. They destroyed him systematically. They fabricated a massive, catastrophic gambling debt in his name using illegal underground casinos they control. They ruined his reputation, stripped him of his tenure, and then drove him to an early grave through sheer, relentless psychological terror. Dante listens to the anatomy of the destruction. It is the exact kind of cowardly, parasitic warfare he absolutely despises. When the father died, Luca finishes, turning the tablet off, plunging the cabin back into the comforting, heavy shadows. The Falcone family transferred the fabricated debt directly to the daughter. They applied compounding, illegal interest rates. Elena is not paying off a loan. She is paying an extortion fee, simply to be allowed to breathe. The men in the white van were sent to remind her that the interest is due tomorrow. The silence inside the armored SUV is no longer just quiet. It is a physical, terrifying pressure. It is the heavy calm that precedes a catastrophic natural disaster. Dante looks down at his right hand. He slowly rotates the gold signet ring. He had spent 2 years wandering through the echoing, empty halls of his grand palazzo, mourning a son he could not save from a biological illness. He knows the agonizing pain of watching a bright, innocent future be extinguished by an unstoppable force. But the force trying to extinguish Elena is not a biological illness. It is a group of greedy, arrogant men. And Dante Medici is the absolute apex predator of men. The Falcone family had weaponized the girl's love for her father. They had stolen her warmth, forcing her to freeze in the rain, working 3 jobs to pay for a sin her father never committed. They had turned her education into a prison sentence. They think they own her future. Dante whispers into the dark, his voice carrying the immovable weight of a falling mountain. He does not order Luca to prepare a sum of money. He does not plan to negotiate with the Falcone family. He plans to break them so completely that their name will become a cautionary tale whispered in the darkest alleys of Italy. "Take me home, Luca," Dante commands smoothly, settling deep into the leather seat. "Tomorrow, I am going to the university." The historic campus of the University of Florence is a sprawling, ancient monument dedicated to the pursuit of human knowledge. Its towering stone cloisters and arched walkways have stood for centuries. designed to elevate the minds of those who walk beneath them. But on this damp, grey November morning, the shadows clinging to the Gothic architecture do not offer sanctuary. They offer a hiding place for parasites. Elena walks slowly across the central courtyard, heading toward the medical faculty building. The biting wind from the previous night's storm still lingers in the air, cutting through the damp fog. Her heavy canvas tote bag, filled with water-damaged anatomy textbooks, digs painfully into her fragile shoulder. Yet, despite the bitter chill of the morning, she is not freezing. Draped carefully over her left arm is the incredibly heavy, bespoke Italian wool coat that the towering stranger had placed on her shoulders the night before. She has not dared to put it on again. The fabric is far too pristine, too terrifyingly expensive for a girl who counts copper coins to afford a tram ticket. She carries it like a sacred relic, a physical reminder that for one brief, impossible moment in the freezing dark, someone had cared whether she lived or died. As she approaches the narrow stone archway leading to the anatomy laboratories, her exhausted, measured pace abruptly falters. Parked illegally on the cobblestone path, half hidden behind a marble statue of a forgotten philosopher, is the white van. The heavy, suffocating dread instantly paralyzes her lungs. She tries to turn around, to disappear back into the crowd of passing students, but it is entirely too late. 3 men step out from the deep shadows of the archway, effectively blocking her path to the medical building. They are the debt collectors of the Falcone family. They wear cheap, dark leather jackets that smell of stale smoke and unearned arrogance. They do not belong in a place of learning. They are brutal, uncompromising enforcers who make their living by crushing the vulnerable. The leader of the group, a heavy-set man with cruel, dead eyes, steps directly into Elena's personal space. The physical intimidation is immediate and entirely suffocating. "You missed your tram last night, Elena," the leader states, his voice a low, gravelly threat that carries over the dull murmur of the campus. "We waited for you by the library. It is very disrespectful to make us wait when the interest on your father's account has just compounded again." Elena shrinks back, her knuckles turning white, as she instinctively pulls the heavy Italian wool coat tighter against her chest, using it as a futile shield against the encroaching nightmare. "I do not have the money today," Elena whispers, her voice trembling violently, betraying the absolute terror gripping her heart. "I just paid the principal installment on Monday. You said I had until the end of the month for the interest." The 3 men exchange a slow, mocking glance. The leader chuckles, a harsh, grating sound that echoes off the ancient stone walls. The rules changed at midnight. The leader lies smoothly, thoroughly enjoying the psychological torture of a trapped victim. "And since you cannot pay, we are going to have to take collateral. Medical school requires very steady hands, does it not? It would be a catastrophic shame if a few of your fingers were accidentally broken on your way to class today." 2 of the enforcers take a step closer, cutting off her only remaining escape route. The courtyard around them seems to empty. The few students walking nearby lower their heads and hurry away, recognizing the lethal, unspoken reality of syndicate violence. Elena is completely isolated, trapped in a nightmare from which her intellect cannot save her. She closes her eyes, bracing for the inevitable violent impact, but the impact never comes. Instead, the atmosphere in the courtyard undergoes a sudden, catastrophic shift. The damp, grey morning air suddenly drops 10 degrees. The dull murmur of the distant city completely vanishes, replaced by a suffocating, terrifying vacuum. The distinct, heavy scent of cheap leather and stale smoke from the Falcone enforcers is instantly violently overwritten by the dark, overpowering aroma of ancient cedar, library leather, and cold cigar smoke. The leader of the debt collectors stops smiling. He freezes, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up as his primal instincts scream that a massive, apex predator has just entered the hunting ground. From the shadows of the adjacent cloister, Dante Medici emerges. His footsteps on the damp cobblestone are slow, methodical, and completely devoid of urgency. He is a monolith of suppressed, lethal control. He is wearing the exact same impeccably tailored, dark charcoal suit from the night before, but he is noticeably missing the heavy wool coat that is currently clutched tightly in Elena's trembling arms. Dante is never impulsive. He does not draw a weapon. He does not shout at the men to step away from the girl. He simply walks forward, his dark, tempestuous eyes locking onto the 3 Falcone enforcers with a calm that entirely terrifies anyone who understands the true hierarchy of the Florentine underworld. He stops a few feet away from the group. The silence that falls over the university campus in that moment is absolute. It is not merely the absence of sound. The silence is the physical, crushing weight of a storm about to fall upon whoever dares to touch what he has protected. The leader of the debt collectors slowly turns his head. He looks at the towering, broad-shouldered Don of Florence. He recognizes the sharp, aristocratic features. He recognizes the heavy gold signet ring resting on Dante's right hand. And then, with a sickening, paralyzing jolt of realization, the leader looks down at the incredibly expensive, bespoke Italian wool coat that the terrified medical student is using as a shield. The catastrophic truth violently shatters the enforcer's arrogant reality. The girl they had been hunting, the vulnerable student they had planned to physically break in a university courtyard, was not alone. She was holding the personal armor of Dante Medici. She was under the direct, physical protection of the most dangerous man in Italy. The villain destroys himself without Dante having to lift a single finger. The immense, unearned arrogance of the Falcone debt collectors instantly evaporates, replaced by pure, unadulterated cowardice. The 2 enforcers flanking Elena immediately take 3 frantic steps backward, raising their hands in a pathetic, desperate display of surrender, completely terrified of the silent, glacial authority radiating from the Don. The leader's face strains of all color. He is a dead man breathing stolen air. He opens his mouth, desperately trying to formulate an apology to the king he has just profoundly offended. But his throat is entirely paralyzed by fear. Dante Medici does not look at the thugs. He looks at Elena. He looks at the dark circles under her eyes, the heavy canvas bag, and the terror that still grips her fragile frame. The storm has arrived, and it is entirely focused on the men who dared to make her shiver. The absolute silence of the university courtyard is no longer merely an absence of sound. It has become a heavy, living entity, a suffocating pressure that pins the 3 Falcone enforcers to the damp cobblestone. They are brutal men who make their living by terrifying unarmed civilians, yet their cowardice is entirely exposed when faced with true, apex authority. They look at the towering frame of Dante Medici and realize, with a sickening drop in their stomachs, that they have cornered a fragile medical student who is currently carrying the personal armor of the Lion of Florence. Dante does not reach inside his tailored suit for a concealed weapon. He does not need a gun to execute a man in this city. He only needs to speak his name. He takes a slow, deliberate step toward the leader of the debt collectors. The oppressive, dark scent of ancient cedar, deep library leather, and cold cigar smoke completely erases the foul stench of stale smoke and cheap leather the thugs brought with them. Don Medici? The leader stammers, his voice a pathetic, broken rasp that betrays his absolute terror. We did not know. She belongs to the Falcone ledger. It is just a matter of business. Dante looks at the man with a gaze so entirely devoid of human warmth that the enforcer visibly recoils. You forge gambling debts to steal the legacy of an honest professor, Dante says, his voice a low, resonating hum that vibrates through the damp stone of the ancient cloisters. You terrorize a grieving medical student in the middle of a storm to collect interest on a phantom sin. That is not business. That is the behavior of parasites. The enforcers do not dare to argue. They keep their hands slightly raised, their eyes darting toward the exits, desperately trying to calculate how to survive the next 30 seconds. Dante turns his attention away from the trembling thugs, dismissing their relevance entirely. He looks at Elena. Her dark eyes are wide, filled with the overwhelming shock of a sudden, impossible salvation. She still clutches the heavy Italian wool coat to her chest, her knuckles pale from the strain. Dante reaches into the inner breast pocket of his dark charcoal suit. He withdraws a sleek, encrypted dark ledger and a heavy platinum pen. He writes a single, devastatingly large figure on a piece of thick cardstock, signing it with the absolute authority of the Medici crest. He turns back to the leader and drops the paper onto the damp cobblestone directly at the man's feet. "I am purchasing the debt," Dante declares, his tone absolute and immovable, completely rewriting the financial architecture of Elena's life. The principal is paid in full. The fabricated interest is permanently annulled. If the Falcone family has a dispute with this transaction, tell your Don to bring his grievances directly to my gates. The leader stares at the heavy cardstock on the wet ground, nodding frantically. He knows that picking it up is his only ticket out of the courtyard alive. The villain is completely destroyed by the silent authority of a man who values honor above extortion. Dante looks at Elena again. The harsh, lethal lines of his scarred face soften into a profound, quiet sorrow as he remembers his son, Marco. He remembers the biological fire he could not extinguish, and he acts with pure moral justice to protect the brilliant potential he sees standing right in front of him. "You will not work 3 jobs anymore, Elena," Dante tells her softly, his voice a gentle anchor in the freezing morning air, ensuring the thugs hear every single syllable. "You will sleep. You will study. You will learn how to save human lives." He takes a step closer to her, his towering frame completely shielding her from the predators and the cold. "The Medici Foundation is establishing a full, permanent medical scholarship for you," Dante announces, elevating her position from a hunted victim to a protected scholar in a matter of seconds. "It will cover your tuition, your housing, and your textbooks. It is established entirely in the name of my son, Marco Medici." Elena's breath catches in her throat. A single tear escapes her dark eyes, tracing a warm path down her pale, exhausted cheek. The crushing, suffocating weight of her father's fabricated debt evaporates into the damp November fog. She is finally safe. Dante slowly turns his head back toward the 3 paralyzed enforcers. The dark, turbulent water in his eyes returns, colder and infinitely more lethal than before. "Her education is now my most expensive investment," Dante warns them, his voice dropping to a freezing, terrifying whisper that permanently scars their minds. "Make sure she never feels cold again." The enforcers do not need to be told twice. They scramble backward, practically tripping over their own feet in their sheer desperation to flee the courtyard, abandoning their white van and disappearing into the dense morning fog. Dante stands alone with Elena, the storm of his authority, having completely cleansed the campus of the men who sought to freeze her future. The heavy, damp fog of the Florentine morning begins to slowly lift from the ancient stone cloisters of the university courtyard. Dante Medici does not linger to receive the overwhelming, tearful gratitude that Elena is desperately trying to offer him. He is a man who operates in the deep shadows, and standing in the light of a rescued future is a reward he still believes he does not fully deserve. He turns his broad shoulders away from the medical building, leaving the 22-year-old student standing safely on the wet cobblestones. She is no longer a hunted victim trembling in the freezing rain. She is a protected scholar of the Medici Foundation, armed with the absolute certainty that she will become a doctor. The incredibly heavy, bespoke Italian wool coat remains draped over her arms, a physical shield that she will likely keep for the rest of her life, as a reminder of the night the dark spared her. As Dante walks back toward his waiting armored SUV, his slow, methodical footsteps echo against the centuries-old architecture. He looks at the heavy gold signet ring on his right hand, feeling the absolute weight of his crest. In the violent, blood-soaked hierarchy of the Italian underworld, syndicates measure their strength by the number of men they can put in the ground. They hoard wealth and terrorize the vulnerable to build fragile empires of fear. But Dante understands a much older, much heavier truth about the nature of authority. The lesson of the morning is absolute. To amass wealth and influence while allowing the brilliant, innocent minds of the next generation to be crushed by systemic cruelty is the ultimate failure of a ruler. He could not save his own 4-year-old son from the freezing biological fire that took his life. That profound, Agonizing failure is a permanent scar on his soul. But by securing Elena's education, he ensures that one day, she might possess the medical knowledge to save someone else's child from the cold. However, the preservation of light always invites the wrath of the dark. Outside the secure, ancient walls of the university campus, the Falcone enforcers are retreating in absolute disgrace. They have abandoned their extortion plot, but the humiliation of their defeat will not remain a secret for long. In the criminal underworld, a public loss of face is a wound that quickly festers into a demand for blood. The Falcone family relies entirely on fear to maintain their fragile control over their territories. By purchasing the fabricated debt and permanently annulling the interest, Dante has not just saved a medical student, he has publicly humiliated a rival Don. He has drawn a definitive, unyielding line in the sand, declaring that the parasitic practices of the rival factions will no longer be tolerated in his city. The Falcone patriarch will not accept this financial and social execution quietly. A man who forged a gambling debt to destroy a noble history professor will not hesitate to use far more cowardly tactics against the Lion of Florence. In the darkest, most heavily guarded rooms of the Southern Territories, whispers of a coordinated retaliation will begin to circulate. The Falcone family will start reaching out to exiled factions, attempting to build an alliance born of wounded pride and desperate greed. Dante Medici has successfully shielded a brilliant mind from the freezing rain, but the storm he has just invited upon his own empire is only beginning to gather. He steps into the dark, quiet sanctuary of his vehicle, ready to face the impending war. Power that does not protect knowledge is merely tyranny. If you believe in loyalty above fear, subscribe. Stay loyal.